It's the pit in your stomach of like, oh my gosh, I have to anticipate controlling all of my feelings right now because the most heartbreaking news that it's just this other reminder of other people are building their families and I can't, like that's coming again. And yeah, I had a lot of moments like that and I didn't handle it well. I would break down, I would cry. I was really angry at people who did not deserve me being angry at them.
I learned so much recording this episode and having this amazing conversation with Lauren Allen. She is a sugar addict turned nutrition coach, and she helps women optimize their fertility and balance their hormones. Lauren does an amazing job of breaking down really overwhelming or hard to understand information in a way that is just really digestible. We talked a lot about stress, hormones, foods to help fertility, the benefit of eating well, not only for fertility, but for your overall health. There was so much to learn from this episode. I am so excited for everybody to hear it.
All right. Well, Lauren, welcome so much. And we had a little glitch here. So thank you again for your patience. But I'm so excited to have you and just so much to talk about. What I love, I listened to your episode with Emma. What I loved is, and it's kind of in my journey too, it's like what you're doing now is born out of your own experience. And it sounds like you didn't sort of anticipate being in this type of work. But based on your own journey, you've been able to pay it forward to other women. So I'd love for you to share. Let's maybe start with your journey and your work and the work that you do and how you found yourself doing that work.
Sure. Thank you so much, Beth, for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, I did not ever expect to be here. And I'll share a little bit about my journey. So basically, now I'll fast forward a little bit first, then I'll go backwards. Now I am a nutrition coach. I specialize in women's hormones and health and fertility, which is really funny because growing up, I was never ever interested in health, like at all. And I always call myself a recovering sugar addict because I was the sugar girl. I was a baker. I was really into like baking every kind of cookie and macarons and fancy stuff. And I didn't really see a reason to want to eat healthy because I didn't feel like it tasted as good. And I was always thin. My natural build was just always thin. I had a fast metabolism. So I thought, listen, I'm just genetically lucky. I hit the jackpot. I was that girl that everyone hated. And okay, fine. Like that's what it was until I started trying to get pregnant. And then all of a sudden, for the first time, I started really paying attention to my body. And I noticed that my periods were irregular. I noticed some other things that were like not so connected, but I was having all these eczema flare ups and psoriasis flare ups, and I never slept well and I had a lot of anxiety. But I kind of just feel like I'm part of this generation that we have all these things going on, anyways. And I mentioned things to my doctor at 6 months and at 9 months into my journey trying to conceive, and they were like, nope, you're healthy, you're fine. We didn't really check anything out. And then once I hit that 12-year mark, they're like, okay, let's go. Let's do all the tests, send you to a fertility clinic. So it was like a quick turn. At that point, I was really honestly happy to start going to an infertility clinic because I had been so frustrated at that point, and I just felt like something is wrong with me. Why is everyone around me snapping their fingers and getting pregnant? Like I must be doing something wrong. It's been 12 months. I'm this young, healthy girl. I was only 20. I was trying from ages 22 to 24. I got married young and I really wanted to be a mom. And I was just like, what is wrong with me? So when I
And
went,
I want to stop there because I think
yeah,
that I want to hear more about, I think what's so hard, and we were kind of talking offline, like that emotional journey. Like what was that 12 months like? I think a lot of things happen, and I can speak from my own experience, like just emotionally what's happening, especially like when you lay out on maybe the comparative piece where you're seeing other people get pregnant. Like, how did you navigate that? And also the frustration, and maybe frustrations with not having answers or not understanding why, or maybe not having more insight.
yeah, I felt like it manifested in every area of my life. And I'll be honest, I did not handle it graciously. So socially, it was a really big thing. I would never really say I was someone who had social anxiety, but I started getting really anxious about going to things like weddings or dinners because sometimes I would be somewhere where I would see someone with their bump and I didn't know they were pregnant, or like that's when people would share news in person and I just wanted to become a hermit. I was like, I can't handle it. I had people really close to me announce their pregnancies during that time where I could not keep it together and I was bawling. And I was like, "Oh, I'm so happy for you." But it was like so clear that I was clearly struggling to get pregnant and I wasn't so happy for them. And it was really embarrassing. And I felt like, it manifested socially. It obviously affected my marriage. My husband could do no right. Like if he asked me how I was dealing with it, I'm like, "Why are you bringing it up?" And if he didn't mention it that day, I'd be like, "How have you not asked me about how sad I am about the fact that I'm not pregnant?" And like, it manifested a lot that way. And then with my relationship with myself, I just started to develop almost this paranoia. And I remember having these thought loops of like, something's wrong with me. I'm sick. Something's wrong with me. Why can't I get pregnant? Then like randomly I'd feel really tired or nauseous. So I was like, oh, maybe it's happening, but don't get your hopes up, because if you do get your hopes up, it's going to be even worse when you're not. And like I'd skip going to the gym because I was so tired and nauseous, and then I wasn't pregnant. I'm like, well, now I'm just lazy and not pregnant. And it was so exhausting to have this in every area. It was really, really hard. I'm like getting emotional even thinking back, because I can click back into that place, even though it's not my reality now. But I remember it so well, and it was consuming every aspect of my life, personally, my marriage, social life, everything.
Yeah, and you and I were talking. Yeah, and I had the same experience, and you and I were talking offline, like how you sort of can connect the fact that you're not pregnant or trying to get pregnant to everything. Like I can connect it to like dinners I would be at and be like, oh, I thought I would not be drinking at this dinner because I thought I would be pregnant, and I think it can just seep into every part of your life unless you're like a lot of mindset work or really intentional. And it's really, I relate to that so much. It's really hard. And this internal conflict of like you want to be happy for your friends and you want to show up for your friends, and there's this duality that like I am, but I'm also like very sad that I'm not there.
Totally. And I knew intellectually, of course, them having a baby takes nothing away from it. It's not like they took my baby. It's not about that. But I think also, let's be honest, it's so real that when people move on to that stage of life, and I know it now. I'm a mom of two. Like, everyone's talking about the strollers and sleep schedules, and it really takes on a whole new phase of life, and you feel left behind. And it's really hard. Even if you are happy for them, you're like, well, I'm still not in that place where all my friends are, and that's really hard.
Yeah. So I love your honesty too, to say like I didn't handle it graciously. I think that's really honest.
Yeah, well, I think there's also then this pressure now for people to, try to be happy for them, and the best is yet to come, and I'm still going to live my best life. Like we did all the things, we traveled a lot, and I remember also being like in South Africa on safari with my husband, and we kind of decided like we had a really hard year with it. Let's go travel, and for the summer it'll be like a nice break. And it was still really hard. I was like, I'm still not a mom. I'm just not a mom in South Africa now, and it's nice to be on safari, but like I remember also thinking a lot, people could see all the pictures of our vacation and it looks great, but they don't know inside it's eating me up so badly. And even like a friend would text me hi and I would get a panic. I would feel the cortisol flood my body because I was like, are they going to tell me they're pregnant? And sometimes that was the case. Sometimes it wasn't, but I just was like, I felt like I was consumed by infertility. And yeah, I want to be honest, because I think I'm sure there are other people who don't handle it graciously. And I really didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it can be really hard to handle it graciously. It's so funny. I had a similar experience when you're talking about that text with your friends. So we were out to dinner with friends a few weeks ago, and I'm like in the midst of the like, embryo transfer journey, and that's weighing heavily on me. And so she like announces at the table, she's like, so we're working on a new house project, and like they're very into doing this stuff. And like, oh my God, she's gonna say it's a nursery. Oh my God, she's gonna say it's a nursery. It wasn't a nursery, but I had that same like, this is about to come out of her mouth, and how am I gonna handle this?
I totally relate to it. It's the pit in your stomach of like, oh my gosh, I have to anticipate controlling all of my feelings right now, because the most heartbreaking news that it's just this other reminder of other people are building their families and I can't, like that's coming again. And yeah, I had a lot of moments like that, and I didn't handle it well. I would break down, I would cry. I was really angry at people who did not deserve me being angry at them, but there were friendships that were also really affected. And again, like I'll, tell the rest of my journey, but I'm a mom now. There are still friendships that were affected by the way people shared their pregnancy announcements with me 4 years ago, because it cut really deeply.
Yeah. No, we talk about friendships too in sort of this journey. And like, It's interesting to hear your story too, because yours started in your 20s, and we speak a lot to like women in their 30s and 40s, because I think what happens in those decades too, it's like, not only is it your own internal pressure, it's like societal pressure too, of like, okay, now you're this age, you should have these things. But really it's about, I think it's like the internal pressure. It's like when you're ready to do those things, it doesn't matter if you're 20 or you're 30. It's like about when you're ready to do those things and you want those things and those things aren't happening.
Totally. Also, just for context, I'm Jewish, I'm Orthodox. And in the Orthodox Jewish world, people get married like 20, 21 and get pregnant pretty quickly, like within a year. That's the norm. So I know people who are listening in their 40s might be like, what are you talking about? Like, you're getting pregnant at 24 is super young. But within my cultural norm, it's also the kind of thing like, people are not usually waiting so long. So when a couple is not pregnant within a year or two, people are kind of looking around at you, or like, giving your belly that look, or when are the kids coming? Like in our culture, it was very obvious, I think, that we were having trouble, and the norm is that people are having babies pretty young.
Yeah. Okay. So you did have both, despite, yes. Okay. Culture. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And that pressure is really, really tough. I know
Yeah.
we diverge. So I do want you to go back to your journey, because I think it's so important to share that and how
Yeah,
you came.
sure. So basically, at this point, I was set to go to a fertility clinic, and they said, listen, you're young, you're healthy, you're a great candidate for ovulation inducing drugs. They had at that point done lab work and diagnosed me with PCOS, which was also very shocking to me because I had never had any kind of diagnosis in my life. Like, I was never diagnosed with anything. Then all of a sudden, I had this chronic condition. I'm like, what? What is this? Polycystic? Like, what? What is this?
Well, that's so interesting too, because you mentioned you would miss some periods, right? And so no doctor flagged that.
So it's really interesting. I had told multiple doctors, I was tracking my periods on the app. I was tracking ovulation. I was like, listen, I'm not seeing positive ovulation tests. I went to 2 different doctors within the first year, and they both told me it's fine, which I now know, like, having irregular periods is not fine. I don't know why that was what they told me. When I ended up working with this fertility doctor, he said, if you had been overweight, you probably would have gotten diagnosed with PCOS a lot earlier, which was really interesting to me because in some ways I felt like, wow, look at how we all lose out when we equate weight with health, because I was this thin girl who didn't get the diagnosis she should have been. On the other hand, I'm sure if I was overweight, they would have just said, just lose weight and then you'll get pregnant, which is not so helpful either. So the diagnosis was a whole thing in and of itself. And then basically the plan was for me to start with ovulation inducing drugs like letrozole and, see where that went. So they had to do all these preliminary checks. Once I had that information, I kind of thought, this is so naive and embarrassing, but I thought I would go to this doctor's appointment and come out with some kind of prescription to like be pregnant. So I was in the car on the way to that appointment calculating my due date, which was like insane. I didn't know how it worked. And when they were like showing me things with injections, and it like hit me. Oh my gosh, I'm not at the end of this annoying journey. I'm starting to like gear up for the marathon. And I was crushed. Like, I was really, really crushed. So I went home and I just started going down this rabbit hole of research on PCOS and what can I do. And I came across all these crazy stories of people who had changed their diets and gotten pregnant. And let me add, like, my diet up until that point was I was eating cookies and muffins for breakfast and French fries for lunch and like some other carby thing, or I would have ice cream almost every day. Like, I loved sweets, and I really also was using them to cope at that point. I was like, life is hard. I deserve a croissant. And I, was like very aware that I would do that, but I really didn't know it was affecting my health so much. And I was
Well,
like, how?
that emotional piece too. Actually, Shelly and I were just having that same conversation, like this idea that we reward ourselves with food, like we deserve it or we use it to cope.
And it works temporarily because you do feel good. It's this cushion, it's this comfort. And I was like, this is just at least one thing. Sugar at least is there for me all the time. And then I was like, now I have to, work on eating healthier. But I was like very much at my wits' end. And because I had to do all these preliminary tests before starting the treatments, I was like, let me start with this today because I'm losing my mind. So I started doing this, like, heal your PCOS type of diet where all of a sudden I was swapping my muffins and my ice cream for, proteins and veggies and all these things. It was like the first time in my life I had tried Brussels sprouts and asparagus and all these foods I had never had before, but I ended up really liking. And then I noticed pretty quickly, like within 3 weeks, certain changes were happening in my body. So my skin really was much clearer. I had always had eczema and I had eczema on my face, and that cleared up like within 3 weeks. So that was pretty crazy. And then I started noticing my anxiety was a lot less and I was a lot less bloated and I was feeling more energetic. I had always had insomnia, like always struggled with sleep. And all of a sudden I was just falling asleep, like the way that other people would go to bed and close their eyes and go to sleep. Like I could do that. And I wasn't taking sleeping pills. So I was like, okay, listen, I don't know what's happening here, but something's happening. And then I was only expecting to get a period like 2 months later because that's what my cycle was like, but I got my period. So I was like, oh my gosh, okay, like I got a period. It happens within like 7 weeks, which was crazy. So then the doctor was like, listen, you could come in if you got your period. We can start like, monitoring and starting letrozole. And I was like, listen, I wasn't expecting to start for another month. I'm gonna take one more month. Like I just had this voice inside me, try one more month. And I ended up getting pregnant on that cycle with my daughter. So yeah, it was shocking. It ended up being a really difficult pregnancy. I was high risk for a bunch of reasons. I was convinced still that something was wrong with my body and I wouldn't have a successful pregnancy, but I did. Thank God I gave birth to her almost 3 years ago. And I was just like, what just happened? Like, what just happened? And why has nobody ever told me this? How did we not know this? And
That's it.
that's
And
where,
yeah, that I
yeah.
don't know. Yes, I think that's huge. Like, and that's frustrating and that's disappointing. There's still so many gaps in knowledge. And I remember at the fertility clinic that I went to, I said, "Is there anything else I can be doing?" Because I think, and let me know if this kind of your been part of your journey and you're feeling too. I think when you go through these journeys and so much is so uncertain, like when you can grasp to a little bit of control, like where you're like, okay, I can do this thing. Like I can focus on my nutrition. I can focus on supplements or whatever. Like I latch onto those things because there's so much I can't do or there's so much out of my control. But like I remember going to doctors too and no, just take your prenatal. That's it. Never said anything about nutrition, diet, nothing.
Yeah, I relate so much to that. And with the women that I work with, I really see having something that you feel like, okay, I can't control. And listen, even if you make all the diet and lifestyle changes, it's not like a magic pill that automatically works. It's not like that. But it gives you some sense of control. And you do know, we know from research, and we can get into that also, there's so much we could be doing within diet and lifestyle to actually boost egg quality, to optimize hormone efficiency. And once I learned that, I mean, going into like my trying to conceive journey for the second time, I said it was night and day because the second time around, I was armed with so much knowledge. I was like, I'm going to do all the things. I was eating really healthy. I was going to acupuncture. I was taking the right supplements. I was doing like different mindfulness and stress reduction activities, which I certainly wasn't doing the first time around. But I was like, let me really make sure that also this is a time where, if some stressful thing comes up with work, with family, I'm like, no, 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 this is the time I'm going to be so protective of my fertility. And I felt this sense of peace going into it. And I was like, I didn't even know it was possible to feel peaceful about trying to get pregnant. I assumed trying to get pregnant equals stress, anxiety, confusion,
That was your
fear.
journey. That was your first
And
journey.
and I learned that really knowing this information can empower women so much. And so that's how I got into this. And I got certified as a health coach and I specialize in women's hormonal health and fertility. And I just try to share as much information as I can to people because I think when women know this, it's more than just like knowing how to eat healthy. It's such a deep part of us for women who yearn to be mothers to have some sense of knowledge and control over your fertility.
Oh,
It is amazing.
well, the knowledge, yeah, knowledge and control. I love how you said that. Those two pieces I think are so integral. And I think there's so much gap in knowledge. And, you know, it's helpful to have people like you that are putting, and like you're like amazing and you're putting out great content and you're knowledgeable and you're relatable because you've been through it too. And it's really disappointing to still have like a medical system that just is like, well, this is all you have to do, or just take this drug, or like, and just not really like informing you or holding your hand. And then this responsibility is on us to like Google and find other resources that are helpful.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much. Second of all, I always like to be, you know, not angry and say like all the doctors are terrible because they don't tell us about this. I mean, I felt pretty angry for a while because my doctor had actually told me like was doing an ultrasound where they were literally looking at my ovaries, and he was like, listen, you're not going to get pregnant naturally, which also felt very crushing to me. Like that sounded very final. And then I was like, that wasn't even true. I've had 2 natural pregnancies now. So, on the one hand, I felt really frustrated and disappointed. On the other hand, I think the reasoning behind it is part of such a more complex issue regarding our medical system and the way that, we look at pregnancy and fertility in general, at birth in general. We medicalize it. It's not something it's not a disease. And we're not really looking at the root causes in conventional Western medicine. We're looking to treat diseases in an acute way. So, I don't find it so helpful to sit here and be like annoyed at the system. I've kind of gotten over that and focused more on like, okay, well, how from the bottom up can we give women and empower them with information that they could take to their doctors and ask them, because we want to feel like we have a good relationship with our doctors and they're batting for us too. But also what you could just be doing at home every day in and day out.
Yeah, I think you're right too. It's like the frustration or the anger with the lack of information is not going to change that, right? It's just doing things like this. It's like, and the benefit of women sharing their journeys and sharing what's worked for them and the knowledge that they have. It's like just staying focused on that versus what's not working. Well, I would love for you to share some of your knowledge with our listeners, because a lot of our demographic is women, struggling with infertility or, going through egg freezing. So maybe we could start with a little suggestions you might have for women that are thinking about egg freezing or are about to go through egg freezing.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I want to talk specifically about egg quality. And when I talk about egg quality, I feel like that word gets thrown around a little bit. So I just want to like really explain what I mean. If you were looking at a cell, and I know people here are not necessarily seeing what I'm doing, but I'm just like making a little circle with my hands. There's a few different parts of the cell that we want to be in really excellent condition when we're talking about an egg cell. So the first is the DNA, or the nucleus, which holds the DNA, which basically keeps the instruction code for the cell. So I always like to give analogies for those who are not so into science.
This is amazing. I'm fascinated. I didn't know any of this.
So I don't know if you've ever built IKEA furniture, but when you get an IKEA piece, let's say a wall unit, they're going to give you this whole instruction code of how do you build the wall unit. So the DNA in the cell basically gives the instruction code for how you build the baby. And think about it, like when a cell is becoming a full-on baby, there's so many things it needs to do. It needs to build a heart and a skeleton and muscles and a liver and kidneys and a million things. It's such a miracle. And if there's damage to those chromosomes, to that DNA material, that egg cell is not going to be able to develop properly. It might not be able to even get fertilized, but sometimes it could get fertilized but not actually be a viable pregnancy. And especially when it comes to egg freezing, people know you could get 20 eggs from a retrieval, but how many of them are viable? What you care about at the end of the day is like how many viable eggs do you get and how many embryos do you get? So making sure that the chromosomes are intact is really important. And another piece that's really important are the mitochondria. So I don't know if I'm like taking anyone back to 9th grade bio, but do you remember like powerhouse of the cell? Do you remember learning that phrase? Okay. So the mitochondria are like little battery packs in your cells, and they basically power the cell to have enough energy to divide and grow. And the growth that, again, is required, especially in those first 10 weeks. I know the baby's small. If you ever see on those apps, it's like the baby's a poppy seed and now it's a blueberry. But relative to how it starts out as this microscopic, tiny little dot that we can't even see, it's growing at an exponential rate. And it needs a ton of energy in order to do that. And we get that energy from the mitochondria. And so when we have really high functioning mitochondria, we know that the eggs have enough power in them to not only develop properly, but also for the baby to develop properly, because you need that power to keep the baby going until about 10 weeks. Then the placenta takes over, but until the placenta takes over, we're relying on those battery packs. And basically, there's a lot of things in our diet that can bump up and like protect the DNA and the mitochondria from chemical damage. So that's a lot of fruits and veggies. Do you want me to give specifics? I'm happy to like get really
oh my
specific.
God. I'm like, this is amazing. I have never heard it explained this way. And you really break it down in a way that's so like digestible. This is so amazing.
Well, I should also have warned you, I'm a bio nerd, because for me, learning it this way makes it so tangible, and it's not this like woo woo, wacky alternative, like do this weird diet thing and then it magically makes you pregnant. It's like really learning, oh, this is how my egg cells are formed. And then there are certain things that can, you know, cause more damage in those things. So, like, for example, Harvard did a study on soda and high fructose corn syrup that it caused a lot of inflammation and decreased fertility for both men and women. It damaged those chromosomes in egg cells and in sperm cells. So that we know that a lot of high sugar foods, high fructose corn syrup are not really supportive to our fertility. A lot of highly processed foods, deep fried foods, those are things that can actually be causing inflammation in the body that ends up damaging those chromosomes, those DNA instruction codes in the egg cells. But there are also foods that have these really amazing compounds that protect your egg cells from inflammation. So I'll just give a few examples. One is selenium. It's a mineral that we find in a really high quantity in Brazil nuts, Brazil, like the country. So I always advise my clients take like 2 or 3 Brazil nuts a day. I take it with my prenatal. It's literally food as medicine, and it can just really help protect your egg quality. Vitamin C is another one that I'm sure people know about. People know vitamin C and people know to take it when they're sick, but we get that in so many different fruits and veggies. I know oranges get like all the attention when it comes to vitamin C, but bell peppers are really high in vitamin C. A lot of cruciferous veggies like broccoli and cauliflower and kale, different leafy greens. So there's so many different fruits and veggies that you could add. Berries are super high in something called anthocyanins that also help protect your egg cells against inflammation. So there are all these really cool ways that we can start to look at food as medicine, which I'm also really really passionate about. This is not about dieting. This is not about manipulating our bodies to shrink or change the way they look. It's really about making sure that our body has the proper nutrients to build healthy egg cells and make sure that they're as good quality as possible, especially before an egg retrieval. And I'll also throw this out because nobody told me this, and I wished I knew this in my journey. It takes about 100 days for an egg cell to mature. So let's say you ovulate tomorrow, okay? That egg cell has been affected by everything that you've done in the last like 3 to 4 months. So if someone is starting to change the way that they're eating, you might not see a massive change in terms of your egg quality for 3 or 4 months because whatever you would ovulate with tomorrow, it doesn't really matter what you ate today. But if you're working for 3 or 4 months on making consistent changes, that can really boost your egg quality. And we know that poor egg quality is one of the top reasons that women are struggling with their fertility. It's the reason for about 60% of miscarriages. So this is really, really important. Yeah. And they've done studies, especially on couples undergoing IVF. There was a study done in the Netherlands, actually, that saw when people are following a Mediterranean style diet, they had, I think it was a 40% higher chance of getting pregnant. And they did another one in Greece where they had a 40% increased chance of getting pregnant and 30% decreased risk of miscarriage. Because this is another thing people don't talk about, that all these fertility treatments and their success rates are often given in pregnancy rates, not live birth rates. And when I found that out at the beginning of my journey, trying to, like, when I thought I was starting fertility treatments, I was like, what are you talking about? I don't want to get pregnant and have it not. I want a baby. Like, I don't want to just get pregnant. I want a baby. And when I realized how low some of those odds were, I was like, okay, that's really scary to hear. But when you can combine medical interventions, or, I mean, listen, I ended up doing things naturally and I'm really happy that that was my story, but that's not always the case for people. I totally respect medical interventions are an amazing tool to help people build their families. You could do this alongside fertility treatments and increase your chances.
Well, and I think too, what in sharing your own journey, there are just all these other benefits, and maybe the initial motivation is to help your fertility, but like change your diet has all these other benefits as well. And you were sharing your sleep and your skin and your anxiety. So I think it's like a win-win because now you have sort of this sense of control. There's something else I can be doing, and it's helping my body in other ways. The 3 to 4 months is really interesting to hear and to know, and I think for me and part of my journey is there's always this impatience. And I think this is what happened to me this last time around, where it's like, I want it now and I don't want to wait. So that makes total sense that like it takes more time for this, the changes you make to improve your egg quality. But it is hard to hear 3 to 4 months. But for women listening now that are thinking about egg freezing, because for a lot of women, that decision doesn't happen overnight either. So it's like you can do this now while you're deciding whether or not the egg freezing journey is for you.
Totally. And it's not to say that, oh, if you are hearing this and you have an egg retrieval scheduled for 6 weeks from now, that you can't implement some of these changes. Like, especially, I would say, more than a couple of days in advance, it is still going to affect the egg and your overall health. There's also, we didn't even touch on hormones yet, but the way that your body produces hormones like progesterone, which is our main pregnancy hormone, right? The progestation, it's the pro pregnancy hormone, which is a really important part of getting pregnant and staying pregnant. That's also really affected by the way that we eat. And there are certain foods that help you boost progesterone production. So there are so many different ways that the way that we eat is affecting our fertility. And it's not just about egg quality. That's a big piece of it, but it's not the only piece of it.
So yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so what are some things would help progesterone?
So it happens to be a bunch of animal based proteins are really helpful: chicken, meat, fish, pumpkin seeds. There's a bunch of also fruits and veggies. Fruits and veggies, they're always going to give us a lot of things that are helpful for us, but different nuts and seeds are also really helpful. So it's kind of just making sure that your diet is really rooted in whole foods. And it's not to say you have to eat perfectly, that you can never have a piece of cake or anything like that. But when you're getting in a lot of these really nutrient dense foods, you're having chicken and sweet potato and you're including natural nuts and seeds and things like that, it's going to also help you with boosting your progesterone production. It's going to help you balance out your blood sugar, which is also really important, especially for women with PCOS. So yeah, there's a lot of things like that that you could be eating, and just be conscious to add them to your shopping list, and it doesn't even have to feel overly overwhelming
Yeah.
or stressful.
Well, I love that when I was listening to you on Emma's podcast, Turning 30 podcast, like the mindset it sounds like you introduced to is like, you said things like, you know, look at every meal as an opportunity to nourish your body and think about like, it doesn't have to be so restrictive, but like adding something, like if you're going to eat the cake, go for a walk because, moving your body after is helpful. So I think having that type of mindset, or just knowing, like you said, doesn't have to be so overwhelming, is really helpful, especially if you're using this to help support a fertility journey or an egg freezing journey, which is already so stressful in itself. Like doing it in a way, or making these changes or adding things to your diet in a way that's not overwhelming.
Yeah, that's a really important thing for me. And I would say when I work with people, we focus a lot more on the strategy of how do we work on building consistent habits that fit you and fit your lifestyle, as opposed to, here are the good foods to eat, here are the bad foods to eat these, don't eat those, because that's so, first of all, that's not going to help anyone. It really doesn't help. And also, it's not sustainable. And like you said, especially with, when it takes 3 to 4 months for your egg quality to catch up with your changes, we need it to be sustainable.
Oh my God, absolutely. So true. One of the other things that you said that I want to touch on quickly is this idea you mentioned, the idea of trusting your body. And for you, it was like making these changes allowed you to trust your body more. And I know for a lot of women, for myself included, there's this really easy opportunity to just blame your body, or to be frustrated with your body, or to hold the narrative that your body has failed. Can you talk a little bit to like your own journey with trusting your body and how you work with your clients on that? Because I think that's so huge.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you asked that, because I love talking about this. And I'll be really honest, I don't feel like getting pregnant solved that for me. So when I got pregnant, I actually kind of transferred all my anxiety about getting pregnant to staying pregnant. And I hope this isn't like overly triggering for anyone, but I was having bleeding in my first trimester. I was high risk for multiple reasons. I was convinced that the egg quality wasn't good enough. It had only really been like 2 months of making these changes, not 3 to 4 months. So I was like, it's not a good quality egg. What's going to happen? And I really did not trust my body to bring a healthy baby into the world. And then even when I did, like even postpartum, and I was breastfeeding, if I ever had a dip in my milk supply or something was going wrong with that, I was so quick to be like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my body? My body is like, I don't know, I got a lemon. And it was so hard to just constantly be like redirecting that energy, just having it manifest in different ways. And when I really started to heal it is actually when I started my journey with yoga. I started yoga just because I had so much physical pain in my pregnancy. I had a lot of hip pain and back pain, and it was the only way that I could move my body. And I didn't even think it was so fun. It was more just like I felt so much better and I had a lot of release from that pain when I did it. But when I started doing it really consistently, what I found was that I was showing up almost every day and I would have these other thoughts about myself like, hey, I didn't think I could do that pose, but I could. And let's say I was trying to do some kind of balancing thing. I was like, wow, I didn't think I was going to be able to do that balance. And I'm so wobbly. But I would look at my feet and be like, look how hard my feet are fighting to keep me upright. And it was so powerful. I won't say it was like I did one yoga class and I, started loving my body, but it was really this consistent practice with it that I just found I was meeting my body in a totally different way than I ever had before. Literally like you're in these all weird pretzel shapes and I was like, "Oh, hey, this is new. I've never experienced being in a body that is trying to twist like this." Like that was kind of cool and fun. But then in a much deeper way, I saw that showing up consistently really helped me with that piece of I am not broken. Look at how much I'm working on, just being stable and also really understanding like why sometimes the body doesn't get pregnant. That also really helped me. Your body is really trying as hard as possible to conserve energy and only try to invest the energy in getting pregnant if things are checking out metabolically and with your overall health. So I really try to look at it as like my body is so wise and it knows when it's safe to get pregnant and it knows when it has the nourishments. Me not getting pregnant was not my body failing. I think we have a really, really tough environment that we're put in where, the convenient, easy way to eat is with unhealthy foods. We are not taught this information. We're not really taught to be connected to our fertility. And so there's a big problem with the environment, but it's not because my body's a lemon. And really integrating a lot of that knowledge plus for me, like a lot of it came through yoga and sometimes doing like um, body scan meditations where you're just like tapping into different parts of the body and bringing awareness to them. That really, really helped me build trust with my body in a way that thank God I could say today I have a totally different relationship where I'm like, no, I trust you. Like you've got it. And again, I know it's probably easier to hear on the other side of my motherhood journey, but I really do try to remember like our bodies have been designed in such an incredible way. And it doesn't help us. Healing is really hard when we're working against our body. We've got to be on the same team as our body.
Yeah. And we were talking about this offline, just like sort of this idea of hindsight. And I think for both of us and hearing more about your journey is that there is so much we wish that we could have done differently or we had known more about or different mindsets on. But I think what's so wonderful about what you're doing, and it's my hope for this podcast, is like, I want to pay it forward. Like, I think there are things that women can, do now to help mindset, to help nutrition, to help not be in the place where maybe I was emotionally going through these journeys. So maybe there is like purpose to what we went through it because we're doing this work now to help other women. So I think that's so incredible.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. I do feel really lucky because I can now look back on that really painful journey. And I really do feel like I understand I had to go through it to become this version of myself. I can say also in motherhood, I know that I take really good care of my body and it's helped me a lot in motherhood in a way that I don't know how I would have survived, the sleepless nights and all those kinds of things. Like now I really know how to take care of myself and I can model that for my family. But yeah, it does feel really incredible to be able to say, okay, listen, I went through this, but women shouldn't have to. Let's put this information out there because it takes a little bit of time to learn it, but it's not rocket science. And women can be doing so many different things to optimize their fertility and just like giving that power back to the woman. And it doesn't have to be about going to the doctor and having everything just done in the clinic. I know it can feel really sometimes like you're taking action when you do fertility treatments or go to the doctor, but I found it very passive. Like there was just a lot of waiting involved and it depended on so many things and the doctor's schedule and like when the results would come back and you never knew when they were going to call you. So like, but what if I'm out at this thing when they call me with the results? Like there were so many passive pieces that were really hard for me. And this journey felt much more proactive to me, which I think is really helpful for a lot of women.
Yeah. And mentioning the consistency, right? Giving yourself that time and to build in those habits to see the results and benefits of it. And I love that these tools like yoga or nutrition or even mindset meditation, they have additional benefits. It's not, even if it's, again, the motivation is to help the fertility, that's like it's a win-win. I mean, all these things are so helpful
Totally. I
to
always say the only side effects are that you end up also feeling better. And I worked with a client who was she was going through IVF for the second time. The first time she had done it, it was not successful. And then she wanted to work with me. And she said, even just going through like doing my shots all over again, I feel so much more empowered. And also like my mood is a little bit more stable. The nausea is a little bit better. Like just going through that, even with all the physical side effects of the hormones she was taking, she said, the fact that I'm taking such better care of my body it's made the journey really different. And I feel much more proactive in this journey at the same time.
Yeah, I think anything you can do, anything additional that you can do to help support yourself through these journeys, whether you're thinking about you're egg freezing, you're going through IVF, or everything is needed, because these journeys are just so emotional and they confront you in so many ways. And so if there are things that you could be doing to take care of yourself and just make it a better experience, even though it's a hard experience, is amazing. And I appreciate you so much, because a lot of this is really overwhelming. And the little time we've had together and you've shared with me, like, you break it down in a way that is so digestible and not overwhelming. So I would really love, before we wrap up, I know you started your own podcast, so like tell everybody where they can find you, because the way you talk about it, you're so knowledgeable, but two, like a lot of this stuff people don't know. Like we just don't know these, and you just broke it down in a way that is so easy to understand and not overwhelming. So I'd love for you to share where everybody can find all your amazing information and knowledge.
Okay, thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate it. So I should have said this earlier. I have a free ebook. You could go to my website. It's laurenallennutrition.com. It's called How to Boost Your Egg Quality, a step-by-step guide. It's 33 pages. It will give you specific foods that you could include, specific supplements that have been shown to help boost our egg quality. So that's free. It's also like, I try to keep it really, really simple. It's more in depth than what we went into on the podcast, but it's regular English. It's not like fancy bio language. So everyone can get that. I share a lot on Instagram. I like Instagram the most out of all the social media platforms. So I'm also Lauren Allen Nutrition there. The podcast is called About Health and Hormones, because it's about our health and hormones. You can find me on Apple or Spotify. And then I work with women one-on-one. I also have an online program called The Empowered Path to Pregnancy, which really walks you through step by step, like every single thing that you need to know if you're like, I really want to dive into this head first, learn everything about how to optimize my fertility. You can check that out. It's also all the information's on my website. And yeah.
Amazing resources. This is incredible work. And I thank you so much for being here and sharing with our audience. It's going to be, it's helpful. It's so helpful to just have more knowledge and understanding of the things that we can do for ourselves.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for you hosting this platform and bringing me on, because I think the more that women talk about it, the more we also realize we're not alone going through it. I thought I was the only person going through this until I opened up about it. And then I got so much feedback and so many women going through the same thing. So thank you for doing this.
So many women. I mean, that was
I hope it helps people.
Yeah, it certainly will. I mean, it's helped me. It's helped Shelly. It's going to help so many people. I know you're helping so many people. But yeah, that was sort of what this was born out of. It was my journey. I knew one other person that was egg freezing at the time. I didn't, have ton of conversations with people about it. But then after I did it, I just kept hearing it from friends, from clients. And like, we're all like going through this solo in isolation. Like, we have to cultivate more conversation. So it's really amazing to see that there are lots more conversations happening around these journals.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
If you like the episodes that you're hearing and you want to hear more, please subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for more incredible stories and tools.
When I froze my eggs at 37, I felt alone. I felt unsure. I felt confused and uncertain. And when you're considering such a big decision, feeling those ways do not feel good. So we have created a step-by-step guide to egg freezing so no one else has to feel that way. If you are considering egg freezing, if you're curious about what the process looks like or what you should be thinking about, then this guide is for you. We were really thoughtful in how we put it together. I think it's a great guide. I think it's really comprehensive and covers a lot of the things to be thinking about, to be considering, and maybe some things you didn't even realize you should be thinking about or considering. The goal is to not have anyone feel alone in this journey. So if you're thinking about this decision, sign up through our website, quiettheclock.com. And make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at By the Clock Pod. This is a very big decision, so I don't want anyone to feel alone in it. So if you're thinking about it, grab this guide, and you can also DM me with any questions. I'm here to support you through this decision and this journey.